Hello and welcome to the latest IRIS session brought to you by the Change Exchange. I'm David O'Sullivan. Now, on an IRIS session, anyone can join the conversation, and we encourage you to join us by sending your questions using the question and answer tab on the right of your screen. These IRIS sessions are an extension of BrightRock's Change Exchange. It's an online platform that provides people with a safe place to ask questions, share knowledge, and access tools to help them cope with life's biggest change moments. These are the times when everything from your sense of identity to your personal finances are challenged, like when you tie the knot, start a family, or buy a new house. BrightRock's needs-matched life insurance is the only life insurance that's uniquely structured to change at times like this. Now, on to tonight's topic, taking care of your special needs family. A new addition to the family is always a big moment, but what if that child comes with learning difficulties, mental disorders? A family will be confronted with unique challenges and requirements. How do parents, how do siblings cope with those new challenges? We have two guests with us here in the studio and one joining us on the line from the Eastern Cape. In studio, we have Margot Bertelsmann, whose 5-year-old boy Richie has spinal bifida. Val Witt is the headmistress of Crossroads School for Children with Learning Difficulties in Victory Park here in Johannesburg. And from the Eastern Cape, we've got Stacey V, whose son Travis the Lionheart, he's known as. Travis the Lionheart has a brain malformation called Septo-optic dysplasia. So welcome to all three of you. And Margot, I'm going to start with you. Have you got your executive summary of spina bifida? I'm sure you've been asked this many times. What is this? What is spina bifida?
David, it's a malformation of the spine. Basically, the spine doesn't close properly in utero. It happens very early on in pregnancy. And it has a range of symptoms after birth. So some people have no symptoms whatsoever. In fact, some people with spina bifida don't even know that they have it. And others are severely impaired in terms of mobility, can't walk. But it most often affects the mobility of the lower limbs and the bladder and bowel function.
How does it affect Richie?
Richie walks with orthotics, so he walks with a distinctive gait and some difficulty and slower than his peers. And also he has a regime of bladder and bowel catheterization and enema washouts.
Okay.
So his bladder and bowel needs to be managed like that.
So It certainly comes with its challenges, doesn't it? Because you have an older boy, Felix.
We do.
So you have been able to see the stark difference between raising Felix and raising Richie.
Correct.
We'll explore that in more detail. Now, Val, you, I'm sure a very special person to a lot of people, because my son goes to a school similar to yours. My son with autism spectrum disorder goes to Bella Vista. You've got children at Crossroads who have got ASD, I presume?
Absolutely, yes.
And what other kind of learning disabilities do children have who come to Crossroads?
Dyspraxia, dyslexia, there's a whole range. Dyscalculia, so there's a whole range of children who experience challenges to learning. So they don't keep up with at the same rate as their counterparts, their mainstream counterparts.
I'd imagine that it's difficult in a classroom environment if you've got a child with dyscalculia, a child with dyslexia, and a child with autism spectrum disorder to teach them in the same way.
Yes, it would be. So you cater for your bulk of your class, and you do a lot of differentiation within the class, catering for specific children's needs.
Now, your destiny was always to be in this environment because
Absolutely.
you grew up in a world where you had a child who had Down syndrome.
That's correct.
Tell me about that.
Yeah, I grew up in the UK. My parents ran a foster home. There were 6 kids. I only have one biological brother, and the last little girl was a Down syndrome girl, and she joined us being not very capable. And we were told, really, that she would never accomplish anything, and she accomplished amazing things in the short time she was with us.
So you were, 5 years old when she joined the family?
Absolutely.
And so your career path was chosen for you at 5?
Absolutely. I decided I wanted to teach children like Jane.
Isn't that fabulous? Yeah. Well, we're going to chat to the two of you, but I'm going to turn our attention to the Eastern Cape, to the fabulous Kenton-on-Sea. Stacey V joining us on the line there. Now, this is actually your second IRIS session, Stacey, because we had actually spoken to you about raising tech-savvy children and working in a tech-savvy environment. But let's talk about your child and raising Travis the Lionheart. What is the issue with Travis that sets him apart and makes him the Lionheart?
David, Travis was born with a very rare brain malformation, and the end result has been that he is constantly intellectually impaired and physically disabled as well. And we have found that as he grew older, it's almost as if that developmental gap just widened and widened. You know, so he started out when he was born, we thought if we really worked hard as parents, put everything we had into his early childhood development phase, we could somehow, you know, get him into a regular school by the time he was in grade 1. And he's 8 years old now, and Travis can't count to 3 yet. So we've sort of had to adapt and change as a family, you know, to make sure that we're meeting his needs, but raising his brothers and sisters, his brothers, in a way that is okay for regular kids, but still accommodating a special needs child. So it's kind of an interesting dynamic in our family at the moment.
Where does Travis fit into the family? Are your other children all older than him, or are there siblings who are younger?
So we have the reverse situation. He is the eldest child, and 4 years after he was born, we decided that we felt courageous enough to have another go, and we had his baby brother Ryan, and then we had what I like to call our bonus baby, Oliver, immediately afterwards. So he has 2 younger brothers.
And I'm sure, well, obviously their learning progress is fast accelerated past that of Travis. Is this an issue that could have been picked up in pregnancy, or does it only manifest itself once the child is born?
You know, if we were in the States, perhaps, when I was expecting Travis, the type of technology they have there, they might have picked it up. It's a very small might. But unfortunately, it's not really something that we could have picked up until he was born. And even then, it took us 8 months to correctly diagnose him after an MRI scan was done.
What for you were the first signs that something was wrong?
He was, I like to say that he was sort of a velveteen rabbit when he was a baby. He lacked muscle tone. He was a little bit flopsy. He liked to make cuddles, but he wouldn't really squeeze you back. He had no grip. His eyes didn't seem to focus very well on objects as he got older. And of course, us being first-time parents, we thought that he would sort of grow out of it, and we didn't really know any better. And a lot of people tried to speak to us about it very gently, but I don't think we wanted to believe it until the doctor showed us in black and white.
What percentage of the world's population, I hope I'm asking a question that you know the answer to, are affected by this kind of...
The last statistic I saw was something like 1 in 6 million cases, 1 in 6 million births.
That's extraordinary. Tell me about now that you've got the younger children, you can make the comparison, you can see what Travis misses out on. What for you are the bigger challenges as he grows up in raising him and making sure he can blend into the environment as normally as possible?
Well, here's the interesting part, David. In the beginning, we thought that we would be able to raise the sort of dual family together in the same household. And a lot of friends and family suggested to us that, you know, they would say, when you're putting Travis in a home, and we would, over my dead body, would we ever consider putting Travis in a home? Why would we do that? But then he got older and stronger and more difficult to manage. He became more frustrated. And we eventually said to his neurologist, what are we going to do? We're at our wits and we don't know how to cope anymore. And she said, have you thought of respite care? And we said, no. What is that? Respite care is a situation where your special needs child can spend a weekend or a short holiday away with specialized caregivers, and you can just, the family, have a bit of respite. And Travis was so happy where he goes to respite care. It's a place called Oak Haven in Glen Austin in Midrand, that a few weeks ago they said to us, listen, we have 1 space left on the residential side. Would you like that space for Travis? And we said, oh, no, if ready for this move, it was dramatic. And we held a fundraiser to gather some money together because it's quite expensive to have a child at time in residential care. And he moved there 2 weeks ago. And this is actually our first family holiday without Travis with us.
And how's that going?
You know what? I don't think his little brothers are taking a lot of strain, but as his mom, I'm finding it quite hard to be away with him, even though I know that he is far happier where he is right now than he would have been trying to fit in with our regular family or our neurotypical family. So what they do is they send me regular photographs over WhatsApp to just ease my anxiety a little bit.
But it's an important lesson I think we're learning here is that you are basically saying that Travis's condition is such that he requires now full-time professional care. It's not something that you are able to take on in a family environment with his siblings and allow him and the siblings to progress. Is that, have I understood that correctly?
No, you're 100% correct, David. And at first I was quite sad about it. As we went through the process, obviously we didn't just send Travis to respite care at the first facility we found. We did a lot of investigating and visiting different places to find the best fit for him. At the very first place we went to, the lady said to me, I'm so glad that you are putting together a care plan for Travis at such a young age. Because what happens is special needs families, when the child turns 18 or 19, then suddenly they decide, now we need to put a plan in place for his care as he grows older. And when she said that, it sort of changed my thinking about the situation, and I realized she's right. What I'm doing is I'm putting together a well-considered plan for his future. And once I started thinking like that, I started feeling a lot better about the situation. Today I know Travis is in the best place for him, and he's receiving the best care that our limited budget can buy. And I know that it's the right thing for him going forward and the right thing for our family as well.
Well, those are the two important points. I would imagine any decision regarding Travis, your first one would be what's best for Travis, but closely followed by what's best for his siblings.
Yeah, absolutely. And then right at the bottom of the list comes me. How do I feel about it? Which is quite a different scenario. Obviously, it's very difficult for me, but I have to put Travis's needs first and his brother's needs first as well. And then perhaps I'll consider my needs at the bottom of the list.
Now, I'm going to encourage people to go to you write the blog, Travis the Lionheart. And how long have you been doing that now? And have we lost Stacey at that point? I think we have. I think we've lost Stacey, but I'll get you those details. She has the blog where she writes about, documents Travis's progress, called Travis the Lionheart. Stacey V on the line from Kenton-on-Tees. We'll let her get back to the first holiday, I think it's a respite holiday for that family. But to my guests in the studio, I've got Margot and Val with me. Now let's go, Margot, let's talk about, you've listened to what Stacey's situation is. Were there areas of empathy that you felt that was similar to our environment, even though the conditions affecting your children are so different?
Yes, if I can make a general point about disability, you know, or special needs, as the term is now, if you have a child with special needs, I think it's so tempting to try to place yourself on a continuum. Oh, we're better off than these people, or we're less better off than these people. And there will be people who look at your family and go, oh, I could never do that. I might be able to do this. I could never live like that. And I think that the more parents with special needs you encounter, and the more you encounter the variety that there is out there, you realize that every family takes what they've been given and makes of it what they're going to make of it, you know. And additionally, that you don't take disability I keep saying disability, special needs, as the only experience that defines the human experience or the fullness of family life.
Yes.
That other people's lives might be full of other difficulties and challenges, bereavements or terrible losses or poverty. And so you sort of try to contextualize your family and the disability in your family in that context.
I hear you completely. You then don't know what normal actually means. And people say a normal environment. Well, really, normal compared with what?
Because there is no normal.
There can be all sorts of dysfunction in many families.
Correct.
You just don't know where it's coming from. It really is a case of how do you adapt to it.
Yes.
And I always describe my situation with my boy, Michael, who's 11, is that I want to try and allow him to blend into society. And it's not my term, it's the term that his headmistress used at Bella Vista. And I thought it was the appropriate way. I don't want him to fit in like a square peg into a square hole. He's always going to be the square peg in the round hole. But if he can blend in and find a niche for himself and a place where he's comfortable, then job is done. Does that make sense, Val?
Absolutely. I think it's about families finding what works for them and growing from there.
Now, for you, Margot, it came as a rude shock, didn't it?
Yes.
You had to immediately start getting your head around this. It sounds to me that you have done a lot of thinking, a lot of exploring, and I'm sure through your writing as well. You write a very entertaining blog. What's your
Master Bloody blog?
Your Master Bloody blog. Yes,
.blogspot.com. Yes.
Because you're a writer, and you do express yourself so fabulously, and we can see the humor and the pathos. You get all the elements of emotion that you write. I'm sure that is also a coping mechanism for you, is it?
Oh yes, absolutely. I mean, the byline is "What doesn't kill you makes you funnier," and I feel like if that doesn't happen to you, you're doing it wrong. You know, and it shouldn't kill you. I try and manage Richie's reaction to his disability because it's now getting to an age where he's aware of it, you know. And I think that's what I was trying to say earlier about it's not when you have a child with special needs, it's not as if you receive him on the day he was born. In my case, he was diagnosed the day he was born. You receive him, oh no, there's this diagnosis, spina bifida, terrible thing, and then you take 6 months to go through the Elizabeth Kubler-Ross stages of grief,
anger,
denial, bargaining, guilt, and acceptance, and then you've reached acceptance, and now you live your life. It's not like that. You know, living with special needs is what they call a chronic sorrow or a living loss. And while that sounds melodramatic, I don't mean it in terms of it's a constant bereavement or a constant grief like that. But there is a loss. There is always a comparison between what your child can do and what others can do, or what your child can't do. And we'll never be able to do
as well, meeting that
exactly
of what you'd hope for.
So at 0 days old, I realize here's Richie, he's got spina bifida, and there's all these emotions. 6 months later, the challenges that you face are completely different, and the emotions are completely different. By the time he's 1, you're catheterizing him and getting your head around that. And that was quite a challenge, you know. And 6 months after that, it's routine and every day. But suddenly at age 3, you have a child who is self-reflexive about his difference. Why are people looking at me? You know, so I think that as you go through life with this child who by definition is growing up and changing all the time, you are, you know, experiencing losses, but maybe different losses all the time. And you feel acceptance one day and guilt the next day, and bargaining and anger and denial several times a day or month or year. You know?
I'd imagine, Val, for you encounter parents like
Absolutely.
Margot all the time.
Yeah.
How do you, do they unburden on you and go through their emotions, their grief, their anger, their sorrow, all of those things?
When they get to know you well, and when they trust you and what your role is in the process, then they will share with you. Initially, no, they keep very much to themselves about, let's just deal with this impact of this learning area, rather than see the whole family or the whole unit and everything they go through. So typically when they come for an initial interview, it's very few people that will open up and give you the life story. Yeah.
I imagine that possibly parents come to you with a sense of denial that we're going to be at crossroads. You'll fix him, and then he'll mainstream.
Absolutely. 2 years later, we'll fix him, we'll mainstream him. It doesn't necessarily work like that. Yeah.
Do you have the tears when they arrive? They're sorry they have to be at crossroads, and then they're sorry they have to leave crossroads because they love it so much.
Yes, absolutely.
What do you find out? And because you can wear both hats, having lived in a family with a child with special needs and then educating children with special needs, how did those early years growing up with a foster sibling with Down syndrome, how did that shape you?
I think that had a huge impact. Obviously, I went into teaching because of that. What I learned from that experience was to celebrate those successes. So every time, and it was a case of 5 of us, every time, being there for her and celebrating those successes. And I think sometimes we're so busy with the running around of normal life that we forget to stop and pay attention to those successes.
But I suppose as well, because you were doing this while you were young, you saw the stigma, you saw the reaction of people towards the young girl with Down syndrome, that it possibly puts you in a very good position to advise people like Margot, like me, who are now worrying so much about our kids sticking out like sore thumbs. For me, it's the biggest problem. And I know that Richie was bullied. And for me, it's one of my greatest fears that my boy's going to get bullied. I'm going to go for boxing lessons because I'm going to start thumping people. It's not the right way.
Can't do that, yeah.
But how do you talk to people about these kind of fears that we have about our children sticking out?
I think that we have to educate. I think we have to place them in situations where they're part of the family and they integrate into society, but you've got to feel comfortable doing that as a parent. So the actual stigma is huge. It still is today. When I first went into teaching special needs in a remedial setting at Bella Vista, I remember parents driving up and literally throwing open the door and kicking their kids out of the car. They didn't want their kid to be there. So I think a lot has changed with education. I think now people are much more accepting of the fact that we will address the issues, not fix them. We will address the issues and we'll learn how to best support your child who thinks differently in a learning environment. Because these remedial kids are bright kids.
Yes, absolutely.
So the stigma is still more about intellectual impairment and my kid's a dummy or my kid's retarded.
That's right.
For me, the quality of every single child is in the value they bring. So I don't really mind if your child packs Pick n Pay shelves or has, as long as there's dignity and pride in what they're able to do.
Exactly.
So the stigma is other people's issues, and the more we educate around that, the better.
Well, that's one of the things that I'm working on at the moment. Is I constantly get bombarded with questions of autism, and they are so badly informed. I think one of the most common things is, but he doesn't look autistic. Well, it isn't a look.
No.
It's something going on in his brain, or well, I behave like that. If I say he can't cope with noise, there will always be somebody, oh, I don't like noise either. I'm autistic as well. And I have to explain the extremes, that they've got to think of this as the loudest, most penetrating noise, and the fact that he has very few filters, that if he's in a noisy environment, all of that is bombarding him at once, whereas we can filter out and listen to what we want to, but people can't understand that. And for me, it's so important is now to get an educational program that is accessible, that people can, and I see it with social media, it's got to be downloadable in a 3-minute bite size. And if I can do something like that, then that's what I'm going to do. On the issue of bullying, because I read that in your blog, Marga, and I found it particularly interesting. At Bella Vista, there is such a focus on anti-bullying. They drum it into the kids. Nobody can pick on anybody. And so as a result, Michael can stick out like an absolute sore thumb, and he's not going to be judged by the other kids whatsoever, because they know that's not what they do. It is a concern of yours. And Richie went through a phase where he just refused to talk about it.
Well, you know, it's because he went so silent for a while, it's hard to know what happened. And so I don't want to say he was bullied as an absolute fact. I don't know that. But what seems to have concerned him very much is that sense of himself as sticking out and being other. I remember standing with him in a shopping line one day, and you know, because he wears orthotics, braces on his lower legs, people notice them. And when he walks, he's very distinctive. You know, he sort of lurches like a zombie from a movie, and it makes him incredibly self-conscious. So he said to me in the queue, a lady looked at him, smiled at him. He said, "Why are people always looking at me like this?" You know, and it was of course awkward for me.
Yeah.
And I turned to him and I said. And I'd had enough because he'd been difficult for a long time. And I said, "Richie, it's because you look different and people notice that." He was like 3 years old at the time. "They are always going to look at you." And then I said, "And you're also a very handsome boy."
Yeah, he's a good-looking lad. Does he take comfort in that? I do with my boy. Because you're a good-looking kid. We look for all these things. I'm amused. You said he lurches like a zombie and you have a big laugh. Have you got a bit of a gallows humor about these things?
Absolutely, you must.
You have to, don't you?
If you don't.
But don't you find that you sometimes get admonished, though? I mean, I get people bringing their feet. You can't talk about your son like that. No, of course I can. He's mad. He's absolutely mad. You know, the other day.
He's yours.
Yes,
You're
exactly.
allowed to. Yeah.
I mean, one of the things of autism is the randomness of their thoughts. And I was once, in fact, it was earlier this week, he had been a complete hell at school. And I was telling him he's got to go to Mrs. Novikone, he's got to apologize, and he's got to do all of these things. Do you understand? He goes, yes, Dad. Do tunnels have restaurants? I could not stop laughing.
Where did they come from?
Where did that come from? And I think, and I said to him, but you've got to repeat what you've said to me, what I've told you. And he's taken it in. He's heard it all. There's no question. But the next question was, do tunnels have restaurants? I don't know where that came from. I tried to look to see what movie he was watching. Was there something in a book that he had read? Thomas the Tank Engine, like so many autistic children, is a big favorite of his. And I thought maybe Thomas was in a tunnel and needed food. I don't know. How do you children sticking out the bullying aspect at Crossroads, Val?
I love the Socrates saying, which is that fairness isn't, everybody is not, I've forgotten it.
No, what's the sense of it?
The sense of it is really about fairness not being that everybody's treated the same, but everybody gets what they need. So it's about if children challenge other children, giving them all calipers, okay, because that's fair. Or giving them all glasses. So you bring it back to a practical example like that and use that as a learning opportunity. And within the school, they take on a kinder, sort of gentler approach.
Yes.
And also your staff must be tolerant of everybody.
Yes.
You know, so you just build that into your school ethos.
And I would imagine as well, not only with autism spectrum disorder, but with other learning disabilities, we learn so much.
Yeah.
You've got to keep current, don't you?
Yes, absolutely.
So are your staff constantly going on conferences?
Courses, yes. Yeah,
I think it's absolutely so important.
Yeah.
But the Belle's point about not everybody having to be treated exactly the same in order to be fair applies also to mainstreaming. So, you know, I'm a fan of mainstreaming where appropriate and possible. And my son is at a mainstream school because there's no good enough reason why he shouldn't be at a mainstream school.
That's right.
However, he is different. And I'm very fortunate that he's at a school that celebrates difference most enthusiastically. So he's not even the only child with spina bifida at his school. And
so then athletics days, races, things like that, where he would be penalised because he can't keep up. He has his own race, or would they?
We're not quite there yet, and we're kind of figuring that one out as we go along. You know,
it's got to be what he's comfortable with.
Yeah, there are lots of ways in which they're meeting us halfway. I mean, Richie's such a go-getter that he's been pestering us. He wants to do soccer lessons along with the other children in his class. Now, I mean, soccer is probably not going to be Richie's sport. You know what I'm saying? It's like,
sure, no, he's not going to be mobile enough for that.
It's probably going to be swimming.
Yeah.
You know, but no, soccer it has to be because all the boys are mad about soccer. So he goes along to soccer, and when the other boys have to run to the end of the field, then he maybe runs, if they even try and suggest him that he runs to the halfway. No. He'll run the whole way. It'll just take him a little longer. So in a way, he decides, you know, there is a willingness to bend the rules or accommodate him in some way, but that child will also tell you, you know. But I think it's so good for children for even the other children at Richie's school to experience him and for him to experience them.
Yes.
So that difference stops being this monster in a corner, but that it becomes something that is the breadth of human experience, you know, and it's just one of the ways in which one person is different. So and this other person is different in another way.
Yes.
So that's exactly where the stigma comes in. If it's an unknown quantity, it remains a stigma.
Yes.
As soon as you bring it out into the open, you achieve so much more. And it's not so scary for everybody else because people are scared of what they don't know.
It's just a process of, and what adults are scared of what they don't know.
Yeah.
Children are fascinated by what they don't know.
That's right.
And sometimes, you know, to the anger of my son, who doesn't quite know how to respond to that yet. So we have to try and give him the tools, because he is absolutely bombarded with children in any new setting who go, "What is that? What are you wearing? Why are you walking funny?" And
But it's so cool. It's robot legs.
Well, it could be, but he's not yet been able to answer that, and it might come. But at the moment, if he goes into his characteristic silence, then I say, "Richie, you don't have to answer that. But if there's a friend of yours that you would like to tell it to, what would you say?" And then we practice a few lines.
And to have a quick retort that says, whatever it is.
Yes, not overcomplicated. No. It's just, I was born this way, it helps me walk.
Yeah, that's basically right. Something short and sharp, and settle that curiosity and get on with things that little boys do and find the common interest.
And of course, the curiosity is lovely. It's not in any way malicious.
It's never malicious, You might find at a later stage it's the adults who become more malicious about these things, but that's in the future. What I find, particularly with physical disabilities, is that people are becoming more and more receptive to that because of the Paralympic movement. And I've been very involved in reporting on the Paralympic movement, where previously somebody with amputated limbs would be, "I can't look." And now they're going, "Oh my God, you are Superman." And I was in London for the Olympic Games and the Paralympic Games. The Paralympic Games was as big as the Olympic Games because people just embrace it. The stadium was packed every single night with 80,000 people wanting to watch these phenomenal people. And it wasn't any kind of freak show, morbid curiosity. No. It was there to go and celebrate the human spirit. And I would like to think that when Richie gets to that age, in fact, it'll be Rio Paralympic Games, that he watches and he goes, "Oh my God, that world is open to me." And that surely is a possibility, Margot.
Absolutely. Well, that would be lovely, yes.
Yeah. Soccer Olympics.
Yes.
He will watch a sport being played there and go, "I can do that one."
Exactly.
That one fits in with me. When it comes to the siblings now, how do you raise Felix with a brother like Richie?
Well, Felix, it's very hard to know to what extent Felix is Felix because of Felix, or to what extent Felix is Felix because of Richie. And isn't that true of everyone in a family, isn't it? So you all relate because of who you are, and also who you are in relation to other people. So Felix is the oldest by about 2 years, but he's incredibly empathetic. I think possibly more empathetic than in others of his age would maybe on average be. He's also very protective of his little brother to some extent. I think many older brothers are. And sometimes I do feel the need to protect Felix from his own protective instincts, because he doesn't have to forgive Richie every transgression just because Richie's frustrated, or Richie's angry, or Richie's smaller, or Richie can't walk properly. Sometimes he can also be angry with his brother, legitimately so.
Absolutely,
I'd imagine there will be times where Felix, though, he will get into a scrap on his brother's behalf. That surely is an inevitable situation.
I imagine so, yeah. And I don't think Felix is a get into a scrap sort of
it might be a verbal
child,
scrap, but he's going to take somebody on.
Yeah.
I'd imagine he will rise to his brother's defense in a big way at some stage.
Yeah.
Val, for you, how do you deal with the issue of siblings? Is that something that comes into your world? In fact, let me not take your Crossroads world. Let's talk about your world growing up as a sibling. How protective were you? You spoke about the celebration.
Absolutely.
And when times were rough, how did it?
No, we were all there. Certainly, I was there. So my only banking at primary school level was because of her. So, there to support her when she was sick, there to support her. It was a huge thing in our lives. So defending, she wasn't with us very long because, as I said, we didn't have the foster home for a huge amount of time, and she did go into a home. So, I can't really say that she didn't start school, for instance.
Yes.
So I wouldn't have known what that was all about for her.
How did you deal with the questions that people would ask? What's wrong with her? I'm sure you got that.
I don't remember that kind of detail. I was too young at that stage.
How do you advise parents to deal with that for the youngsters who are at Crossroads?
You ask them what they're comfortable in saying. So you literally use what they tell you, and then you sometimes have to reframe that slightly for them, but you use what they give you and work from there. So at Unity, we used to do sibling workshops. So we used to have a system where the siblings came in and then learned how to deal with and just chat about their frustrations, about the parents maybe having to spend too much time with the sibling that needed the extra time. All those kind of issues about not relating to their peer group. You know, if they brought home a friend, this child interfering with them constantly, and how to deal with those kind of issues.
That kind of social structures, I think, are so important, or support structures are so important as well. Do you also take parents whose children have, let's say, autism, and encourage them to meet once a week or once a month or whatever, children who parents whose children are dyslexic get together just to share experiences and talk about what they're doing?
I think that parents do in parents groups, but not necessarily included in with the siblings at Crossroads.
But do you encourage the parents to all talk to one another?
Except that it's really hard for parents, I think, to sometimes address their child's needs and somebody else's child's needs. So those social groups don't happen as regularly as the mainstream children's groups do. Or that's been my experience.
Are you in contact with parents of...
Yes, we utilize the power of social media, I must say. So, you know, because of the long tail of the internet, you can find, and I have had conversations with parents in China who have asked me about, maybe they've read my blog and they've asked me questions about, and that's not really feasible for forming a relationship, because what's so wonderful about having 44 parents on a WhatsApp group in South Africa is that we're all in South Africa. So we all discuss the medical professionals, the schools, the orthotists, the catheter providers, suppliers in South Africa together. Okay. So in a way, and so yes, I belong to a WhatsApp group of parents with children with spina bifida across South Africa. But a note on support groups, I find support groups are a double-edged sword. You know, if you have a house with windows and mirrors, a support group can reflect like a mirror back to you your experience to some extent, and it can show you a window of possibility out there. However, someone else's window might not fit into your house.
Absolutely.
And you'd have to be quite a big person to celebrate that person's very large window if your window is not as large. You know, so I think...
It's a very good way of describing it. Yeah, I totally get that. I sometimes find when it comes to my own child, I don't have the emotional energy for somebody else's child. So I'm going to deal with my situation. And because autism spectrum disorder, it's a spectrum, the person who's telling me about their child's experience, I'm going, well, that's not my kid's experience. I think the most trite saying, but it is a real a reality in autism, is that you've shown me one autistic child, you've shown me one autistic child.
That's exactly
They've got so many different traits. We've got a question for you, Val, from a special needs parent. Does your school have therapy programs for children who go there to equip them forward? The word normal will always be put in inverted commas. Obviously, therapy programs are a big feature of Crossroads.
Yes, we have all the occupational therapy, speech and language therapy, learning support therapy to help them integrate back into mainstream schools. But I think when you look at support programs, are they looking at intellectual impairment? In which case, the previous school I was at Unity College, we had this school to work experience program, which was really active in the senior section of the school, where the children went out and progressed in different skills. So much so that we had a child who went on and did diesel mechanics.
Oh, really?
So that was a huge accomplishment for that child, who got an Abbott level 3 in literacy and mathematics. But other children, you know, it was so specialized and individualized to each child. So literally the therapy programs have to be adjusted to suit the nature of the child.
Absolutely.
So different schools do that.
My son has his occupational therapist, he has his speech therapist,
and his remedial therapist or learning support therapist.
And he has huge crushes on all of them, and he gets completely devastated when he moves to the. And the thing as well is they get too upset that they're leaving him behind. They have to embrace a new. But I think they go through that kind of process all the time, having to shed these because they always tell me they just love his mad. Why there are no restaurants in tunnels kind of questions. I presume Richie has a lot of physical therapy.
He does do physiotherapy. Occasionally he does hydrotherapy. Sometimes it all gets a bit too much and then we cut back on all the therapies. But yes, I think his physiotherapy is certainly a useful one.
And is that something that he will have for the rest of his life? Because it's
so.
going to be useful to him.
I imagine so. Or whether it's a biokineticist when he's grown up or what, but there will be some kind of, I suppose, practice to maximize the muscle use that he does have.
Yeah. Does he enjoy the therapy?
Yes, he does. Yeah. He does.
Do you find at your school that the kids love therapy?
Absolutely. It's like their special time to make progress and talk about whatever they want to talk about. And it's just phenomenal.
I love the fact that there's no stigma to therapy, that the kids don't go, well, this is something I don't want to do because it makes me feel different. I remember when my son was at his previous school, therapy was known as, because they were real littlies then, it was having a turn. And they would come in and the therapist would come in and say, okay, Michael, it's your turn. And all the other kids would cry because they wanted a turn.
Yes,
and that's how much they loved having a turn. There's I sometimes find that there's an even closer bond, and I don't know if it's just my own experience, my child's own experience. He's got a closer bond with his therapist than he does with his teacher, and his teacher is all over him all the time. So I know it's a very strong bond, but there seems to be a bigger connection. I don't know if that's your experience. The kids,
not really, no, because they spend more time with the teacher.
Oh, really?
So, yeah. But they love going to therapy because it's fun. It's play. It's not considered
come on, occupational therapy is one big jaw. It is. It's absolutely wonderful. We've spoken about dealing with the child, dealing with the siblings, but now dealing with parents. Do you still shed a tear of loss that Richie isn't ever going to play football like the other boys?
There are those days where my husband and I will look at each other and Richie's struggling so hard to keep up, or he's shouting in frustration because the children are playing a chasing game at a party and he can't keep up. And so there are those days where we are reminded again of the loss. And then there are other days where we are amazed at what he can do. And there are days where we really just laugh at how crazy it all is. So I think, like I said earlier, it's trawling through those emotions all the time, over and over and over again.
Isn't it interesting? You're talking about a son with a physical issue. Mine's got a mental issue, and we have exactly the same emotions. Yes. Exactly the same. We have a good old laugh about the madness of the situation. We mourn the loss of what he could be because now his younger brother is there, and we see what he can do at the age of 3 or 4 now, and we can see how quickly he's going to overtake his brother, even though there's a 7-year gap. But we celebrate, we cheer when he stands up in front of his class and recites a poem or reads a book. In fact, this is one of the other misconceptions about autism, is that they are specially gifted children, and it's not necessarily the case. My son happens to have the most incredible audio memory. So I could read him a passage of text, and if I read it possibly 2 or 3 times and he reads it to himself once, he will then retain the entire thing. So at a very early age, in fact, I think for me, it was one of the first signs that this could be autism, was we drove from Durbanville to Cape Town, the city of Cape Town, and he recited from the back seat the entire Roald Dahl's The Enormous Crocodile, but with the inflections of Stephen Fry, whose audio version he had heard. So he did all the accents, but he was only about 6 years old at the time, and we just drove in complete silence, listening to Stephen Fry in the back seat. But he could do those kinds of things, and then he stood up in front of his class, and in fact, of the school, and he recited a book called Room on the Broom. In fact, it's on YouTube. You go and search for Michael's Room on the Broom. And he stood up, and the teacher said, but he hasn't got the book. He hasn't got the book. I said, well, he's got this. And he just recited the entire thing. And that was just one of the biggest moments for us. But he can't tie his shoelaces. He can't add 1 plus, well, he can add 2 plus 1. But if it's 1 plus 2, he can't do it. He can't see that they've turned around. He just cannot do those kind of complex things. He can't go to SeaWorld and watch the dolphins jump out the water because the children all scream, and then it's too penetrating in his head. Is that are we atypical parents?
Absolutely, yes. The emotions you're expressing really are the emotions that every parent has, but yours is more intense or concentrated almost,
Yes.
rather than more sort of mainstream.
Yeah. I suppose you're not there for the parents, you're there for the children, but to what extent do you have to be there for the parents?
No, you have to be there for the parents as well, because when they break down for the whole family. You know, so the child's not going to make progress, the child's going to be in crisis. So you've got to be there and see what you can offer. And
isn't it also, if I may, if the parents don't acknowledge or can't yet acknowledge what treatment is required or what the diagnosis is, whether that is a physical or an intellectual, or an emotional one, that could be problematic for the child.
Yes.
So it's in everyone's interests that the parents also walk that road towards acceptance of the condition.
Yeah, it is, but you still get resistant parents who will drop and go, and it's the school's responsibility. And that's it. You know, I pay the school fees, the school must sort out. But the parents, the child of the parents who have the greatest support and input are the ones that make the most progress.
Well, it's time to wrap up. I'm going to encourage people to read your blog. Just remind me again, your
Marsableri blog.
Your Marsableri blog. .blogspot.com. And Crossroads, well, I think you've got a website, I know, so if anybody is it crossroads.co.za?
Yep, it is.
It's as simple as that. My thanks so much to Margot Bertelsmann, to Val Witt, and to Stacey V, who was talking to us earlier. I hope that you've enjoyed this IRIS session. We'll be back again in a couple of months' time with another IRIS session brought to you by the Change Exchange with Bright Rock. Thanks so much for watching.